homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room.
On this beautiful Sunday evening, we're pretty excited that you're here. And as you can see, we've got the best panel ever. What are we going to do? Well, first of all, let's thank our mods, Miss Sophia, Mimi J2, Maui Girl, and Teresa M. Thank you, ladies, for all that you do for this channel. Without you, we would be lost. Thank you to our subs and our members, and of course, our Patreon members. If it's your first time here, we welcome you, and we hope that all you do is subscribe and then pass this on through your social media networks. That's all we ever ask here on the interview room. Tonight, we're talking about the alleged Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann and now emerging details that have made this story take on so many twists and turns. We welcome back to the show a person you know and love, many of you, literally, Dr. Gary Brucato. And we also welcome to the show tonight the attorney for the family of Shannan Gilbert, Mr. John Ray, a great attorney and a great doctor. Dr. Brucato, as you know, is a PhD who studies how violent thoughts and actions emerge in psychotic versus non-psychotic persons. He's the co-author of the Columbia University Mass Murder Database, the largest in the world, and it looks like we have an addition, thanks to UNLV this week, potentially. And he's the co-author of The New Evil. This book right here, if you have not had a chance to get to Amazon and get it, you need to pick it up. The New Evil, Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. And there's a link to Gary's book down below. John Ray has been a litigator for over 40 years in New York. He's been fighting for the victims of the Gilgo Beach serial killer for many, many years. Long before Rex Heuermann was arrested in connection with 3 of those murders in July. As a side note, John also still plays lacrosse. He's a goalie, no less, every week, and we want to welcome John back to the show this evening. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also, Dr. Brucato, if you are not aware, if you're in the Manhattan area, he also has a clinical business where he does see patients on a daily basis. So if you're in that area and you need some help, please look him up. He'd be more than glad to try to get you in. Before we get into the information here, let's do a quick recap on the Long Island serial killer case and the accusations from 2 suspect Heuermann. Everybody is innocent tonight until proven guilty at all times in a court of law, and we know that he's been arrested, so he'll have his day in court. Heuermann was charged with murder and the death of 3 women, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. They were all found on Gilgo Beach on Long Island, New York. Heuermann is also the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Bernard Barnes. Did I pronounce that right, John?
Yes. Yes.
But in that murder, he has not been charged. In another murder, Shannan Gilbert, her body was found near the other victims at the beach, and it was the search for Shannan Gilbert that led police to find 10 sets of remains, including 8 women on the beach in Gilgo. But Gilbert has not been connected to Heuermann as of this broadcast until now, potentially. Attorney John Ray says there's new evidence, new witnesses that he's talked to. And if you haven't seen our previous videos on this after tonight's show, go over and click on that. It'll be in the description below, and you'll be able to hear all of those details that John shared. Tonight, we want to get into new details about the Hares and Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup. Asa has filed for divorce from her husband, Heuermann, and she is selling her story to documentary filmmakers. Asa appeared in court for the first time last month, surrounded by her team of lawyers, and a DNA sample was taken from Heuermann's estranged wife that matches genetic material found on the remains of 3 Long Island victims. The alleged DNA match between Asa's cheek swab, which is called the buccal swab, and material found on some of the victims, quite frankly, from an investigative perspective, could be a huge bombshell. Was Heuermann's wife possibly connected to the murders? That's what raises a question comes to the top based on the new DNA evidence. She's not been charged with a crime. She's not accused of a crime. Investigators have previously said that she was not in town during the time of those killings, and her attorney has said they've not received any new DNA reports beyond what was already made public at Heuermann's arraignment last July. So with that said, gentlemen, it sounds like we've got a lot to talk.
It's possible in the formulation that he's coming up with, that you're coming up with, John, that maybe the idea is that she may have participated in some of the activities, but not necessarily been aware of somebody possibly going on and killing victims. Or is the idea that there are indications that she had actually touched those victims, participated in the elimination of victims, or do we not know?
Well, we don't know for sure yet, but the evidence, the circumstantial evidence of her sociopathic behavior is growing immensely, and under such circumstances, circumstantial evidence can be strong, as we all know, as the founding father John Randolph once said in a trial, that sometimes circumstantial evidence is very strong, as when you find a trout in the milk. Well, that's what we've just found with this woman and her behavior. Everything she's doing doesn't make sense, doesn't match up with the presumption of innocence. Think about it. You have 3 hairs that are found on 3 bodies out of 4 that match her DNA. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. If, say, 3 hairs were on one of the bodies, that might make some sense in terms of, the hairs being from her head falling on her husband's clothing and then falling on the victims. But you have 3 separate victims, according to what I've read, and each one has a hair from her, and they're not all killed at the same time. So it's passing strange that could happen. And also you have 1 hair allegedly on the belt, the belt that has the initials on it of HM or WH, as it may be. And how did that happen? You have another factor. If those, her hairs and his hair, 1 hair of his, 3 of hers, or 4, depending on who, and what the reading means that you find. Well, if they were the only hairs, that's kind of unusual in itself, isn't it? If the hairs were just casually left there because they were on the tape that was wrapped around the girls or on the belt, where are the other hairs that would be there? For example, the hairs of the children, the hairs of the dog, or if they had other pets at the time, they had a dog. We know now they have a dog and cats. And where are the hairs of the animals? somebody was sanitizing that, was keeping that wrapping. It appears that the wrapping of the bodies was done in a sanitary way, and it just wasn't done perfectly. But it seems extraordinarily coincidental for all three of her hairs to appear on three different bodies, is the point. And then you also have the point that the district attorney didn't say she was definitely on vacation. We never heard that. When we read the actual indictment, it says that the cell phone was on vacation, basically. Her cell phone, and her cell phone records seem to indicate she was elsewhere. Elsewhere when? Well, first of all, one of the trips is to Iceland, and it's not too hard to get home from Iceland pretty quickly. It's halfway to Europe, so more or less. So it's a quicker flight from Iceland back here. Secondly, the second trip was in New Jersey. That isn't far from the Long Island seashore. And the third trip apparently was in Virginia, I believe. I could be wrong, but it was in one of the middle states. Again, not too far from New York. So we don't know when she went there and came back. We also don't know when these girls were actually killed. We know when they disappeared, but who has ever said when they were killed? Were they killed days or even weeks after they were disappeared? Were they kept somewhere? This man was a torturer, from what we can tell of the bodies. Were they tortured and kept alive? Then when they were killed, were their bodies moved right away? Or were they all moved in tandem, one with the other? We're all assuming that the bodies were moved into the places where they were right after he killed them. That's not necessarily true. They could have all been moved at once at a later time. We don't know. So her hairs getting on those bodies, the time frame of the vacation is not dispositive of whether or not she has an alibi. And so that has to be looked into for sure.
Gary, husband and wife teams. What's the research show?
Well, first of all, it's extremely rare for a sexually sadistic serial killer to have a partner at all. No less it to be a person's partner. There have been a few cases of this. For example, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, Fred and Rose West that I mentioned. David Parker Rape, had Cindy Hendy, who was a significant other that participated. There was Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. There are a few of these, but the reality is that it's extremely rare. And what tends to happen in those cases is that the female partner is participating generally out of a kind of terror or fear of the husband, so that she is safe because she is participating. But in the cases I cited, those are the rarest of the rare, because the females were actually enjoying the sadism also. But there, you can count them on a couple of hands. What is far more common is a situation where, like I said, the female is afraid or feels obliged to keep her mouth shut about what's going on. What I'm puzzled about, John, and what you're saying, and I'm hoping you could address it, is how are his hairs not there? I think it's more peculiar that there isn't a single hair of his.
Well, there is one of hair of his.
There is one.
Yeah.
On which body? I'm surprised they didn't know that. Which body?
I've forgotten. As I sit here now, there's one though of his.
So one hair of his, and how many of hers?
3 of hers on the bodies, and possibly 1 on the belt.
Interesting. So you're saying that the notion that she was out of town is now in question.
Yeah, and even that coin can be flipped the other way too. It's passing strange that whenever these 3 are killed, she happens to be on vacation. Just happens to be. So, look, there's other evidence that she herself has created that calls her innocence into question. And that is, for example, she learns about her husband being a potential serial killer right? Horrifying killings that took place and possibly involving even more than the 4. And she learns this, and what is her reaction? Her reaction isn't, if she thought he was innocent, what would, if she had no idea that this was going on, what would be the reaction of any woman that's married for 27 years to a man that she first learns this of? It would have been horror. It would have been, you're the psychologist, you understand, it would have been, distress. It would have been confusion.
Yes.
None of that seems to have happened. Instead, she introduces herself to the public by giving the press the middle finger several times, sits on her front porch and commiserates, smiles, shows pictures of herself in her ComCon costume, and 6 days later files for divorce. Well, after she files for divorce, weeks later or months later, she declares that she thinks he's innocent through her lawyer. If she thought he was innocent, why the divorce? Doesn't make any sense. There's a scam going on. These two people are risk takers. There's something wrong with both of them. They are extreme risk takers. They are scamming the public, and they're doing it to get money as we speak. That's a stunning development in a case like this, where you would have expected a woman to be horrified and ashamed to even talk to people as a normal person would be. Instead, she has lawyers talking for her all the time, going on television to ask for more money to go into her GoFundMe account to pump it up to $60,000, claiming that she has no income, no sources of money, and yet she had volunteers who put her house all back together, and yet she's asking for money through her lawyers. Something is amiss here. And just like with the book that was mentioned in the indictment of Hunter Biden that he wrote, which is coming back to haunt him, her behavior in this case, in talking to the media and having them accompany her to the courthouse and so on, it's going to come back against her, certainly. And in addition, remember when she shows up in court recently in tow with the Peacock people filming her. And what does she do when she's in court? The woman who should be horrified by what her husband did if she didn't know about it, she smiles and waves at the person she's about to divorce, and he smiles back. They're scamming us.
That it's pretty compelling what you're saying. That to this Margaret says DLR does not look right. That's for sure. We agree. And one of the things I find really interesting is now she just penned a book deal, right, or a movie deal of some sort.
We understand it. It's collective knowledge from the press primarily, but and from her own lawyer, who I spoke with personally, and he revealed to me that at the time I spoke to him, that she was hunting for a deal, for a 7-figure deal, which was imminent to be closed with 50 Cent, the rap singer, and he has a production company that's associated with Peacock, and it was going to go through that company, according to her lawyer, that this arrangement would be made. And then right after he told me that, just several weeks later, we learned from her herself and from her lawyer that the deal was made. How much money was involved, we don't know. And I don't know if there's a book arrangement in it or not.
Interesting. Gary, that's kind of a new phenomenon, isn't it? That, family members, getting all of these deals, these book deals and all this other stuff about all the horrendous acts that, those in their circle.
It really is. This is a very controversial topic, so I'm going to tread very lightly here. But there is a fine line between viewing oneself as an advocate, a victim's rights advocate, spreading the word about what the experience is of being affected by this kind of stuff, wanting to make people feel comfortable about opening up, networking, etc. And on the other hand, capitalizing, flat out capitalizing, so that in a strange way you wind up, doing something just as awful, as as the type of person that you're supposed to be loathing or condemning in the situation. And the trouble is, some people, you can't quite tell which side they're on. I don't know what's going on here, but it sounds like what you're saying, John, is that it might be over into the exploitation side, from your opinion, and that's very interesting. I have to tell you that what I'm dying to hear you talk about is, don't you have witness accounts about all the swinging and the parties and the get? Okay, so was she participating?
Well, the information that I have that I've revealed already is that one credible witness expected to have a swingers relationship with Ellerup and Heuermann at their home in Massapequa Park. And she was going to engage in that with her boyfriend, who was a detective and in New York City. And they brought with them in the car a woman she believed to be Karen Brucato. Now, the police interviewed this lady. I interviewed her at length several times, and I took her affidavit. Then the police interviewed her at the behest of Rodney Harrison. And I haven't heard from the police since then. That was some months ago, about what they found or didn't find. But I have spoken to the witness repeatedly since then. And I still find what she believes occurred to be credible, to be useful. And since the time that we first came forward with her information via that press conference I held in October 18th, and gave that to the public with her permission, her own lawyer, Ellerup's own lawyer, Robert Macedonio, assisted us in establishing her credibility. Because when she says that she and her boyfriend brought this girl in the back seat of their car to Massapequa Park from New York City in or about Valentine's Day of, I think it was 1996. And the girl, she was able to describe the girl and her very full hair, and that she was dirty, she was hungry, and she sat in a very odd way. She sat with herself leaning forward and to the side in the car, and my witness noticed that. Well, that was turned out to have been consistent with a car accident that she had Brucato, before that, where she had suffered injuries, which my witness didn't know anything about. But more importantly was that Macedonio himself went on public TV and said, John Ray can't be correct. This witness is making it up. Words to that effect, because Mrs. Ellerup would never have had sex at that time in February of 1996, because Mrs. Ellerup, he said, was pregnant. We checked out the birth dates, and that conforms. Yes, she was pregnant. Well, women, we know, can have sex when they're pregnant, but we also know that many of them don't want to do that, especially with a third party, a partner, a switchy. And here, that for the first time fits with what the witness herself said in her affidavit, where she said that when she arrived at the house, Ellerup refused to have sex, didn't want to have it. And the witness assumed, without any actual knowledge, that it was because the witness was African American. But that turns out not likely to be true, but instead, we now have Macedonio himself giving us this evidence that the reason was she was pregnant. And that would also explain why they brought Brucato in the first place as a substitute partner in the switchies that they were going to do. And that makes sense. It fits the narrative. And it would also suggest something which the witness suggested to me, which is that her boyfriend and Rex Heuermann very likely knew each other before this incident. And she said that because when she got to the house in Massapequa Park and they had the tryst and then left hours later, they left in a different automobile, which would mean that they switched cars with him, with Heuermann. So that would mean prior knowledge between the two, between the boyfriend and Heuermann, knowledge of one another.
If I'm following everything, and Chris, jump in if you have a different way of seeing this also, but it sounds like if all of these things are true, what it would potentially establish is that she was aware of and or participating in some of the kinky sexual whatever, which could, of course, even explain the hair getting on the bodies. But she doesn't necessarily have to be aware of the murders. There's no clear evidence. I mean, in other words, this could be one of these cases where, she's part of whatever the activity is that is getting a woman to the place. But then the secret could be perhaps that, there's one killer, perhaps there are other people in the group that know about it. But the idea is that then the woman is taken off and killed as a kind of extra for that particular sexually perverse person. But it's possible that she participated in the sexual stuff and didn't know about the murder part. I mean, is that not a possibility that would still meet the evidence?
Yeah, it's always a possibility. But the way I look at that one, Gary, is and John, the fact that once this all comes public, i.e. all the bodies are found and everything. I mean, there's got to be a point where she goes, that's the girl. That's the one.
Well, this is where what John is saying comes in, because now the split is no longer there, right? You're now seeing the person, or at least by accusation, for what he is. So you should expect horror, disgust, etc. Because you'd go, wait a minute, I thought we were just bringing these women home for some fun. I didn't know about that part. And there is a weird mismatch there. I don't know what that's about. So I could see, John, what you're talking about. It's a very, just doesn't jive with the way the average person would react to that discovery. So I see what you mean. But I suppose based on just the concrete facts, it looks like we've got to be open to the possibility that maybe this whole sexual thing was just the kind of, to create a pool from which to then have victims that could be murdered, which was the real thrill, perhaps, for this person.
It would take an awful great effort for Heuermann to conceal this from his wife under these circumstances for all four of these people. And then, the police, I think, are suspecting that he's involved in some of the other murders as well. And so that would just expand the pool, wouldn't it? That potentially Ellerup was exposed to, but somehow didn't know. I'm not treading lightly. I think that was a phrase. I'm not treading lightly at all. I have no need to. I see that she's made herself a public figure. So commentary about her is wide open, and she is, in my mind, clearly should be a suspect. That doesn't mean she's guilty. It means she's a suspect.
I find it interesting, John, to dovetail into your thought process that, let's give her, at first the benefit of the doubt, right? He's out there doing his own thing. There's a little, the swinger thing going on. She's participating in all that. But the moment, I think there has to be a paradigm shift moment here, to your point, where all of a sudden these girls pop up in the news. They pop up on the, one of the biggest stories going on in that area around the country / around the world all of a sudden. And she's sitting back going, well, I don't know anything about this. There had to be a moment where once that information hit, I would submit from an investigative analysis position that once that moment hit, they had a conversation. And, whatever that is, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. But at the same time, there had to be a conversation about, isn't that the girl? Isn't that the girl? Is that possibly the same girl? You know, and if she had relationships with them, then it's going to be even more quite solidified mentally into this process, and which would show consciousness of guilt, which would tie her even further, you know, mens rea, right? The legal term, right? Into this and the totality of these circumstances, whether she plays, I didn't know or not. And now you tie in the three hairs on three bodies with her hair on it. That certainly does raise a lot of questions and a lot of red flags. And I don't think the argument of, I don't know anything about it, specifically if he had a dungeon or whatever he had in that one room with all those guns, and that was his, you know, hall, whatever he was doing, this torture chamber. How does that all come together? I mean, you know, you've been working this case for how long now?
This is my 13th year. So
for 13 years. And what was your first impression when you heard about the hairs on the bodies?
You know, what's the nature of evidence? You have to start with that, you know, principle. You know, what's the nature of evidence? This is evidence. She is a witness to something that happened in that house. Maybe nothing that had to do with murder per se, but had to do with, you know, girls who were sex workers coming there and so on. Don't the police normally talk to all the witnesses or potential witnesses in a case? But they never talk to her. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
That was my initial reaction. And I ask this, why hasn't anybody from the press, who you would hope are pushing investigatively, you know, they're doing their job as investigative reporters, why hasn't anybody gone to Macedonia, confronted him, that lawyer for Ellerup, and said, how come she just said that she believes her husband is innocent, and at the same time, 6 days after he's charged, she seeks a divorce? They don't match. Why not? Why is that happening? Nobody's asked him that question.
Yeah, consciousness of guilt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, she's weighing, what she's doing is she's rolling the dice, in my opinion.
She is.
If I was the investigator, that's the first thing that come into my mind, you know, based on what you just said. And you're 100% right. Wait a minute. This is the gal standing by him saying, no, he's not that kind of guy. He would never do that. And then you're right. 6 days later, I no longer am I going to connect myself with him. And then simultaneously, like you said, flipping off the media, because that basically is flipping off the world. When in a case like this, it's not just the local media. I mean, that finger had a specific message for everybody watching it.
And what was her quote that when she was sitting on the end of the bench, that the reporter extracted from her back when they first interviewed her, when she was challenged? It is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, Gary, tell us that. What's going on in that head?
Who knows what that means? It is what it is.
I know.
I think that's the whole point. But John, how did you interpret that statement? It is what it is.
It is exactly what any spouse who just discovered that her husband was this horrible being, or potentially so, that she didn't know about, is utterly inconsistent with that posture. It is what it is. What about wouldn't you just be horrified and say, wait a minute, I'm speechless. I can't speak. I don't know. This is terrible. My husband's innocent. I never knew he would do anything like this. There's no way that he could have ever done anything like this. He's a good family man. He's a great guy. Nothing like that. Instead, it is what it is. In other words, it's a tacit approval of what she knew. And if you think about that, she also never expressed a word, and still hasn't, in favor of sympathy of any kind whatsoever for the victims and their families. Not one. She's only expressed the economic troubles she suffered because of what her husband had done. These are, these are the behaviors of a true sociopath, aren't they? We don't need to be scientists or psychiatrists to conclude that, do we?
Well, just to clarify something I was saying earlier, there are these rare exceptions, these cases, and I listed a few of the exceptions. I think it came up in the chat that I think people weren't clear what I meant. When I talked about Fred and Rose West and Homolka and Bernardo, whatever, what I was talking about are situations where the female is as psychopathic as the male partner and is fully enjoying whatever it is that they're doing together. But those are like as rare as hen's teeth, as they say. Like you can find, maybe 10 cases or, to 20 cases, in decades. Very, very rare. But when it happens, it's pretty disturbing stuff. I mean, they would just full blown participate in the activity with the husband, can help with the cleanup, getting rid of bodies, luring children or so forth, photograph the crime, all kinds of things. And I don't know if that's the idea here, or if you think that there may have been some degree of participation, or if it's more like turning a blind eye, or I'm not sure exactly. It could be anything, right? I mean, it sounds like, but just to emphasize it, when there's full blown participation, you'd have to be dealing with two pretty psychopathic people where there's no feeling whatsoever towards these people. It's just a matter of business. People are coming over. We do what we do. They're gone next, etc. Has she offered any explanation for why her DNA might be on the bodies?
I have heard no explanation from her lawyer about that whatsoever. But I also haven't heard a single reporter confront him. And that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Strange.
The fact that I think if it was one body, then you can potentially, try to reasonably eliminate why that is what it is. However, if her hair's on 3 bodies, then it is what it isn't. And that in of itself is problematic, because it's okay to, from an investigative aspect, try to figure out, okay, well, how did this transfer? How did this get there? How did this forensics evidence get there on one victim at a certain date, a certain time? Because each one of these victims came into that house at 3 separate days, 3 separate times, potentially 3 separate months. And, to have one, you can say, okay, is there a cross transfer here? But to your point, John, to have 3, and Gary, I mean, you tell me what you think, as also end on the belt. The belt's significant. I mean, that's her hair is being on the belt. I can tell you my wife's hair is not on my belts. They're in my closet, and she's not taking them out and putting them on that I'm aware of. And if it happened, 3 separate times, then I'm like going, wait a minute, what are you doing with my stuff? Okay. I mean, that is just really does not fit right with me personally. But again, we don't know what the totality of that's going to be yet. John, you had an adversarial relationship with the police, early on in this situation, but at some point you guys crossed that bridge together and you held hands. How did you do that? Tell us about that. How'd you get it done?
Well, perhaps I'm engaging in a too fine a point or semantic, but I didn't have a conflict with the police. They had it with me. I always cooperated with the police. I always offered them what I had. And repeatedly, I went to the police with the information I had as early as 2015, after I had taken the depositions of Dr. Peter Hackett and several other people in the community who were involved in the case of Shannan Gilbert. And I went to the police with a binder filled with the evidence in good order and presented it to them, and they rejected it. I offered them Shannan Gilbert's laptop computer, which I had, and as well, I had collected about 7 or 8 of her phones, and I offered those to the police. They refused to take them. They never came for them. And so I did that. When Dr. Michael Biden, when I got Michael to do the autopsy that I participated in, I was there, of Shannan's bones, and then we presented our findings. The police called me for the first time and said they'd like to cooperate with me. And so I said, great. I said, I have nothing to, if anything I said back in the day when I held a press conference, I said, I have nothing but respect for police. It's just a shame that this had to be because of the way it was handled, but I'm ready to cooperate with you. And the chief of detectives at that time, or chief of the homicide in this case, Lieutenant Kevin Byra, said, he called me, said, let's cooperate. I said, great. And he never called me back. I called several times. I never heard from him. Nonetheless, I still cooperated. And information I received regarding a woman that was murdered in Florida who disappeared in Fort Myers, I gave that to Detective Byra. I gave other information regarding the initials on the belt, matching up with a woman who was a paramour of Burke, James Burke. Throughout the whole case, I've given what I have to the police department. And then only when Rodney Harrison called me and said, when he first got in, and he called me and said, let's get together, let's talk. And he brought Kevin Byra to my office. Then they took the information I had, the laptop, the phones, and the binder that I had from 2015, which is, maybe it's not outdated, but it needs to be now added to. Anyway, they took it all. So finally we got to that point, but I was cooperating. They just didn't like that I was doing this work, I guess. I don't know. I can't
tell me you have a copy of everything you gave them.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. That makes me feel better. That's why I asked the question. But go ahead, finish your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Not at all. Maybe I'm going on too long. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Keep going. I love it. The fact that you are committed and you've invested 13 years of not only your law practice, but your life into this, and look at the results that you're getting here. I mean, how many victims you think there could be?
There's many victims, in my opinion, some of who are still alive. They've been victimized by him in several different ways. I have evidence, strong evidence to that effect. And this kind of behavior by him, it wasn't just murder, but wrong word, I suppose. It wasn't only murder. It was other misbehaviors that he engaged in, where he's a stalker, where he is a serial stalker and a serious evil one. And there's other people who have testified to this already, that I have. Now, I've been gathering a lot of the social history of Heuermann and his wife, that I don't know if the police are doing it or not, but I'm perfectly willing to share that with them, as I have all along. So I'm continuing on that course, and at great sacrifice, personal sacrifice. This is a full-time job and more, just to keep up with all the information coming in, to interview these people, to travel to other states to take their statements, to basically field all these calls that come in, answer everybody that has something. It's stunning, the enormity of the work I'm doing. And I'm not inviting it other than what you see. I'm not going out knocking around. I'm not Inspector Clouseau. I don't do that. I'm here in my office, and these people are calling me. So I've done it faithfully and at great expense, enormous expense in time and soul and spirit. It's wearying my family greatly. We've been threatened. We've been stalked. Very seriously stalked twice. So I put my money into it. I've given. I try to help out victims here in this case.
Do you have a page or anything that you set up for the victims' families or anything like that? People could help support you in your efforts?
Yeah, I did. The only thing that we set up is I have a not-for-profit organization that I created, not only because of Shannan and the other victims like Jessica Taylor and so on, but also because I've represented other people who don't have money and are really being buried alive by the system and in the courts. And I set up a not-for-profit called Magdalene Dismas Society, Inc. It's a not-for-profit corporation. And I use that corporation to very modestly to represent clients pro bono who are, as I said, buried alive by the system. And that includes the victims here and their families. So, for example, when I took the trial and did the murder trial of Sarah Gilbert when she killed her mom, I did that through Magdalene Dismas. And I don't charge, it's pro bono. So with the Magdalene Dismas Society, we've been raising money very modestly on GoFundMe recently to pay for the symposium, because that cost an awful lot of money. Thousands of dollars they're charging us to be there, and we have to pay for insurance, we have to pay for security, we have to pay for a lot of things. So to really do this, it's an enormous expense. I've laid the money out myself, but now Magdalene Dismas is there. And it's named after Mary Magdalene, who, as we know, was by tradition, a prostitute, and then, became one of Christ's closest friends, so much so that she was the first one to be allowed to see on Easter Sunday that the grave was empty, and for Christ. And Dismas, who was the good thief on the cross, who no doubt had to have been a murderer. He was certainly a thief. And he is the first one into heaven, according to Christ himself on the cross. So a thief and a prostitute. Yep. I named it after them for that reason. So we have that, and hopefully people can help us out. That's all I'm asking.
All right, everybody. So you heard it. You look it up, get it going. If you find it within your heart this holiday season to help go over there. The other thing I want to ask you, John, you've made a career out of helping the downtrodden, kind of like Gary. Gary he's been studying crazy people for quite some time. And when I say crazy, I use that carefully because, he's had the worst of the worst right in this book right behind me. But you specifically have stayed within, the throwaways within our society. What drives you to that? I had a meeting recently in the Navajo Nation with the Supreme Court Justice of the Navajo Nation. And she is just an amazing human being. And one of the things they have in the Native American culture is they have a peacemaker program, is what it's called. And it's essentially, a tribal member. And their motto is, we don't throw anyone away. And what they try to do is mitigate any future behaviors by working with the families and those downtrodden to help refocus them. And your personality kind of strikes me as one of those individuals that you would fit right into that model. But how did you get there? What drove you to it?
I don't have a good answer for that, except I really don't. I know that over the years, I've watched people being crushed by the system, people who maybe they've done something wrong in their lives, and maybe, they've been misdirected. But look at all the little girls, for example, the beautiful little girls who they weren't allowed to grow up as adults. They jumped right into adulthood. They jumped right into adulthood at an extremely early age because of the circumstances that were imposed upon them. They were crushed by the system, like all of these girls who are sex workers that we're trying to represent. And you look at them and say, they were so beautiful, innocent little children at one time. What happened? You know, what happened to them? And when I think of that, and I realize that everybody that I'm talking about, I don't care, even Rex Heuermann, as hard as it is to say that, is a child of God. And at one time they were little babies and they did nothing wrong, and something changed. And maybe something that changed wasn't all their fault. And maybe therefore they need help. And I'm in a position to help. And, you know, I've just been in that position all these years, and I always been against the abuses of government, the abuses by the system, the abuses by the big shots, by the power authorities, and so on. And I don't like it. I have a visceral distaste for it, and I don't like to see people crushed in when they were, like I said, when they too were young and innocent, like you and I were once.
Thank you. Gary, what are your feelings listening to this conversation? I know, and just so everybody knows, Dr. Brucato has been under the weather all week, and he literally drug himself out of, you know, the depths of sickness to get here tonight for everybody.
I think he may drugged himself with NyQuil, not drug. First of all, I'm reflecting on a case, a very infamous case that involved a couple that I think is instructive to talk about briefly. It's especially horrifying that the perpetrator I'm about to mention is potentially up for parole. Would you believe it? But it's the case of Cameron Hooker and his wife Janice. Cameron Hooker was a sexually perverse man. It's unclear if he ever killed anyone, although the wife says that he did. He and his wife picked up a hitchhiker on the side of the road in California with their baby sitting on the wife's lap in the station wagon. And when the woman they picked up, Colleen Stan, got out to use the bathroom, they came up behind her with a wooden box that had a hole carved in it, and it was filled with foam, stuck it on her head, and sort of locked it so that she was in this sensory deprivation device, so that she couldn't hear or see anything, smell anything. God knows how she even breathed. They then brought her home, and for 3 years, she was kept in a coffin-like box, 23 hours a day. The only exception was the 1 hour she was taken out for extreme torture and sexual activity between the couple, with her sort of sometimes in their presence. And eventually they incorporated the little box with her in it into their bed, had sexual activity with this woman living in the box in the bed. She had to learn to dislocate her limbs, to push a dish underneath herself to go to the bathroom, to eat. The box was over 103 degrees, often 104 degrees. She still, to this day, as I understand it, hears the little air blower that they installed into the horrendous. Anyway, this goes on and on and on. The cruelty of Cameron Hooker was so, just to tell you how sadistic he was, he even took her out one time to visit her family and posed as her fiance for his own amusement. And she had to talk about how beautifully he was treating her and so forth. And then he took her right home and put her right back in the coffin box. Now, what happened is, eventually, when he started talking about bringing another woman in, Cameron Hooker's wife, Janice, decided she wanted to tell this woman, flee, get out of here. This is what's really going on. And she went and talked to the authorities and told the truth. She was originally petrified for her own life, even though she was participating. She decided that she was willing to do so only after they basically changed her identity, gave her a whole new life. And now Cameron Hooker's wife is out there somewhere working as a social worker for victims' rights under a total new identity. No one has any idea what became of her. But it was only when she was given that complete detachment from him did she come clean about what had gone on. But the thing that's so interesting about it is that during the time she was in the marriage, She was willing to participate in all this stuff out of this strange attachment to this guy who was manipulative and psychopathic and incredibly incredibly controlling. And he had a lot of the character traits that we hear about Heuermann supposedly having. And so I just think, that's an example of where a person can even participate in stuff, but there's a little bit of a different psychology to it. And so I think we just don't know what made it happen. But perhaps if she were offered some kind of new life where she could get away from him and there's no chance whatsoever that he could ever know what happened to her. The problem is that if you know anything about Rex, you know that he could find you anywhere, anyhow. I mean, I've heard stories about him that, he could find you like on a boat. Or remember, John, I'm sure you've heard that story about the employee who was on a cruise boat and got a note under the door.
Yes, I did.
Right. I still can't explain that one.
Well, I think it's possible to explain it, but
Tell me. Oh,
by
really?
one theory, but it's only a theory, and
Oh.
that is this: that when Rex Heuermann's house was denuded of its things by the police, one of the things in the inventory of the police, which was mentioned several occasions in Newsday, was the survivalist material that was taken out of the house. That's a particular thing, a survivalist, particular kind of sometimes very weird people are involved in that movement.
Right.
And Dr. Peter Hackett in Oak Beach, and in that case, in Shannan's case, Dr. Peter Hackett had a survivalist corporation called Survivalist Dynamics. And he shared that corporation with a man who was a sea captain for cruise ships who had graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy here in Long Island. And, it's just a theory, but, was there a connection between Hackett and Heuermann via the survivalist movement? The chances are pretty good that connection existed, because they're only 20 minutes away from each other as you drive. As a crow flies, maybe 10. And how many survivalists are there with corporations on Long Island? It's kind of like if you say you collect classic Barbies, or you collect military miniatures or the like. You come to know over the internet who's who trades in what. You get to know each other. You meet. The same thing happens with the perverts, sex offenders, such as Rex with the child porn, which hasn't been mentioned enough in this whole case. The really sick child porn that he was involved in. They tend to form groups, those people. They tend to get to know each other. So did Hackett and Heuermann have a connection through the survivalist thing and through the sea captain? And is that how the envelope got delivered on the ship? Don't know for sure, but
Interesting.
thought.
Actually, it's intriguing you say this, because in the Cameron Hooker case, the way that he would manipulate the victim was to tell her that he was part of a collaboration called The Group, and that the group would always have an eye on her no matter what she tried to do. And the idea was to tell her that everyone could be a member. It could be, even if you try to whisper to the waiter in a restaurant, or you try, they could be part of the group. So it's going to come back to me and you'll be done in.
Well, that's especially true, that the aspect you just mentioned, Gary, of Heuermann in hunting people and haunting people and taunting them and stalking them. He's very much into the same thing, and letting people know that he can find them anywhere, and therefore knowing that he has connections.
Right.
No doubt that that's in this case.
Like he's a god or something. Right. I mean, there are certainly different manifestations of, between the way Cameron Hooker expressed these things and the way that Heuermann, if he's guilty, did. But I tell you, just to really drive home the incredible misogyny of Cameron Hooker, when the judge gave him his sentence, he said something, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was something like, good. I need some time away from these two annoying women, his wife and the victim, right?
Wow.
So that, in other words, great. I'll be in a jail cell. I'll be free. You did me a favor, And of course,
Sounds like it is what it is in a different way.
it's an interesting, but you see, I wanted to get back to something you said earlier that I thought was very, very interesting. You started down this path of saying, why didn't the cops talk to his wife? Like, why wouldn't they have? And I guess what I wanted to know is, are you wondering if there's a network that was protecting against information coming out? Is that the idea?
I don't really know that, honestly. In this case, there's a body of evidence, a strong body of evidence
Mm-hmm.
that suggests that there's reasons why the investigation back from starting in 2011 was suppressed willfully.
Mm-hmm.
That does exist. The possibility that there was an attempt to avoid anybody peering into and prying into these circumstances, that exists. Is it dispositive? No, not really, but it exists. I don't know if the same pattern of behavior exists now with Heuermann. I rather doubt it because the police made a good arrest. They did their job. So, how can you second guess that? I don't know.
But it did sound from discussions we've previously had about witness accounts and so forth that there was some question other people possibly being involved in the network. I mean, who are you envisioning that might be?
I'm not sure what you.
Well, like for example, remember the witness accounts that had to do with things like I think it was Shannan saying they instead of someone is trying
After
to,
the-
like, who is that they? Who could we possibly be talking about?
Well, we don't know, but they is a plural by definition, right? It's more
Right.
than one. And when she first starts out, she says, "Someone," that's one, "is
At
following
first,
me. Someone is
that's
after me."
right.
Then she explains further, "They are trying to kill me." So when you
And
take
doesn't
that,
she say-
could it be that is that a statement consistent with being followed, being hunted, being stalked, and then a group being involved? That's what it sounds like to me.
did she, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't she use the word these people?
Uh,
Or was it they?
I'm not sure about these people. You may be right. I can't remember, but they is a word she used. She said it several times. She said the phrase several times. If she said these people, sure, I'll adopt that. I don't know. I don't remember that.
Okay, I wasn't positive, and that's why I asked.
All
So
right, I'm not
we'll
sure.
just make sure that we take that in consideration. Gary, can you take a look at this question, Gary? What are your thoughts here? It's directed at you. Young family members that were in that house, if they heard things, how would they have coped, hypothetically?
Well, John, you may know better than I do if they've talked to the children about
No,
anything. They may have. You haven't heard anything about that.
nope,
It's almost impossible to believe that they wouldn't
correct.
talk to them about what may have gone on. But look, the reality is that this could turn out to have been an extremely perverse household where there was all sorts of exposure to everything from weapons being in the house, child pornography was in the house, images of little girls with the face beaten, odd, peculiar stuff. I mean, this is a weird household, right? We don't know what was going on there.
Can I just interrupt with one thing? It's a house that was 1,343 square feet. It's a superannuated bungalow. So for anything to happen in that house and not be known or heard
Right.
would be well nigh impossible.
Right. And I mean, unless the idea is that, there really is truth to this idea that the wife is gone. We'd assume, the kids are gone too, and the cat's away and the mice the mouse plays in this situation. It's singular. But I don't know. I can only say that I've seen, everything under the sun in terms of how people react. For some children, it leads to a kind of a normalization, a desensitization to offensive, sexualized things. For example, there are people who become pornographic performers, who we find out in childhood were exposed so intensely and so frequently to sexual violence or their own abuse, that they became completely desensitized and came to see their value essentially as a sexual object. Then there are some people that it leads to a kind of a complete lack of desire to have a partner or trust other people, uh, where that kind of activity becomes completely horrifying. Even normal sexual activity becomes completely horrifying to the individual. It's impossible to say. There's a whole plethora of reactions, but the fact is, children, particularly someone who developmentally disabled, as I understand one of the children is, if anything like that was going on in the home and the children were present or aware of it, it would be outrageous. I mean, absolutely outrageous. I mean, it would sort of elevate the evil of this story like through the roof. It becomes almost unfathomable. I hope that is not even going to come up as a possibility here. But I imagine they're being talked to. And the thing is, we have to remember is even if this is a situation where Rex is guilty and he had been doing this, keeping it a big secret, even in cases where there is that secretivism, what you see, secretive behavior, what you start to see is it spills out here and there. They screw up here and there, and the kids or the wife or whatever glimpse it. Like BTK walking in and her husband asphyxiating himself sexually, right? In a bathroom. Or things like that. You catch it. You discover a photo. You whatever.
Well, but
right.
There's been a sort of a unspoken assumption, I think, that Rex is some kind of an evil genius who was able to conceal all these things for so long, and even if you were that would seem to be highly unlikely. But he was no evil genius. I mean,
No.
if you really look at what he did, it's reckless as hell. I mean, to put four bodies in a row in a place where a thicket that isn't very thick, on a very narrow strip of land where people cross recreationally all the time, that's pretty reckless. And there's other things he did that were reckless as well, including using his own name when he did these things. So I don't see him. I see it instead as an evil miracle that he hasn't been caught until now.
That's a very interesting comment.
Lucky.
See, I think that his collector quality, his need for control, and his pride in his collection led him to foolishly collect all those bodies in one place. If he's guilty, the idea that he needed to have control over them and know where they were at all times and have a place to visit and relish and so forth was his undoing ultimately, because what you would really do, obviously, is want to eliminate the bodies, get rid of evidence completely, and certainly not have them all in one place. But that thing of keeping people. Now, the other thing is, I just want to drive home here is that if it turns out that Rex is guilty and he is a sexually sadistic serial killer, I say this all the time, and I can't emphasize enough how important this is. You have to remember that the average age at which you're going to start committing your offenses is about 27, right? This guy is 59 years old. There is no evidence in virtually any case of serious sexual homicide that you go, you kill a few people and then you just stop, and then you kill a couple later on or something like that. You're just going to keep doing it, right? So you're talking about, I think, if he's 59, if I remember correctly, right? So you're talking about, probably over 3 decades. Now, what are the chances that this person would only have a few victims, 3, 4, 5 victims? First of all, in my own data, which I've never published, my own count, my own database that I have here, the average number of victims for a sexually sadistic serial killer is 12. That's the average. Okay, so if he's just like everybody else who is of this type, you'd expect something like that. But then if you're talking about him being one of these more like Gary Ridgway or Sam Little, you could start seeing victim count that goes up well into the 40s or even above, so that I think we really have to pause and think about, well, okay, well, if he's that type of offender, then he must have a few of these clusters where he gathers a few people together and they're dumped in one place, and there's got to be a few people that are dumped in another place. And there are other serial killers who did that.
Well, we already have evidence that he's been involved with other victims, some of whom have survived. We have that. I have that. I'm going to disclose it in detail at the seminar that I hold at the symposium.
Yeah,
But they exist. They exist for years. This guy's been at his sickness for years, and
consistent with what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's very consistent with what you're saying, Gary. What we know about the guy, and he does use a certain modus operandi. He does, even though there are miscellaneous ways people were murdered here, which may be his modus operandi, by the way. But there's other things that he did engage in, and did so in a way that was repetitive, consistent. So
I'll tell you something else, and I'm probably going out on a limb saying this, but I would not be surprised if it turns out that part of the thrill for this guy was that he liked literally hunting victims. That there was something sexually arousing about the idea of stalking and hunting and then saying, gotcha, right, the same way you would with an animal. Remember, he has an enormous arsenal of guns. I remember you talking about previously, John, about the cab driver overhearing him saying to, I think it was Shannan, something about going out to the woods, in like Ronkonkoma or something, to take a long walk. Am I remembering that correctly?
You mixed the two.
Oh, who's the victim? Was
together?
That,
it's okay.
That Vergara?
No, it was the cab driver who said that.
Yeah.
He said to the cab driver, "We're going to go for a long drive into the woods or walk into the woods. I forget which. We're going to go on a trip into the woods, a long one." So,
okay. Oh, you mean about the cab driver, not about the victim?
Correct.
Even more disturbing to me. But the idea is, I think that he has a lot of the personality traits of serial offenders who have gotten a thrill out of running after the victims in the dark or through the trees. There are offenders who did that. David Gore did that. Bundy chased the victims through the woods. You saw that certainly in Robert Hansen, who chased prostitutes through the woods, hunted them, killed them.
And Rex was well aware of them and followed them, according to at least Nikki, who was the girl that he met in Port Jefferson, New York, in the fish steam room. He seemed to take some pleasure in knowing about these others, so maybe he's copying them.
Well, he may very well, but he has a lot of the traits of someone who it isn't only expressed through sex. That the domination and control isn't only expressed through sex, but there's something also about this idea of like being able to find a person no matter how hard they try to wriggle away from you. Right. So that I think that gave him some kind of godlike feeling.
That fits with his survivalist equipment. Survivalists go into the woods, they go into the marsh, they build huts, they set up camps and so forth. Because they're going to survive the nuclear holocaust or something like that, the end of the world, who knows? But they do those kinds of things. It's precisely what appears to have occurred here.
Right. So I'm a little horrified as I start to envision what happened to a victim before her death. I mean, it must have been a psychological torture in addition to whatever else went on. If this guy is guilty, it doesn't sound like, he just immediately kills somebody.
No, he took pleasure when he called
Yeah.
Barthelomew's sister, Melissa
Right.
Barthelomew's sister. He told her things in the 7 or 8 calls that he made to her. He told her things about what he saw, how he watched as his victim died, and how he took pleasure in it, and how he took pleasure in being near the rotting body. So he's got that. He's got all those tendencies right there,
Right.
clear as day.
Yeah, and you know even if strangulation or asphyxiation by ligature was the means, this would have only been after a period of, you know, the woman's adrenaline pumping like crazy because she's been trying to get away and screaming and running all over the place and the whole thing. I think that would have been all just very exciting to this kind of a guy. And you know, the more you think about it, the more horrifying it is. But Chris, when you say it comes across as having that kind of sadism, it's not just physical torture, but getting in here, you know, seems to have been part of the fun.
Yeah, part of the fantasy thrill, right, Gary? I mean, building it up to getting him, you know, to that place where he can actually function.
That's what
And
it seems like.
yeah, and you know, it's not like anything else. As if, you know, he goes out of his. He's got a very compartmentalized, contained environment internally in control.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how far was he was right down the street from your office, wasn't he, when they threw the pizza box?
Yes, literally, just about 1 or 2 blocks up. I
Yeah.
told you I ate pizza at the same. I had to have been the same place. I threw my trash in the same bin.
Yeah.
Or I
And
know exactly where it is, on the corner right in
Gary
front
sent
of
me a picture.
325.
Gary sent me a picture of him leaning over.
Part of the
I'm
same
going to show that picture one day where he's leaning over the trash can, like kind of like that's where they got
my
the
trash
pizza
in the same
slice,
bin.
right? And well, thank goodness. Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us here are going to be surprised if Vegas doesn't roll out some type of connection somewhere in terms of the totality of the bodies they got up there. I wouldn't be surprised if the property on South Carolina becomes relevant pretty quickly, and anything on the East Coast between there, if there's a similar.
He's got a connection to Virginia as well. He has a connection to Massachusetts.
Yep.
He has a connection to New Jersey. You know, and perhaps other places as well. But
he's a traveler.
And he uses all those places. He doesn't just have them. He uses them.
Yeah, he's a traveler. I had a case years ago down at it was Lake Charles, Louisiana. Remember the truck driver that was throwing girls to the alligators down on the bottom? Gary, you know what I'm talking about.
That whole story, yeah.
Off the 10.
Horrifying, yeah. But.
Yeah, and anyway, we went down there and consulted with that group that was trying to chase that guy down. Eventually, they caught him. But I think the more we know about his travel habits, I think there's going to be a victim within a geographic region potentially.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think my prediction is that they'll be in little groups, little collections.
Okay.
Because he seems to have he is a collector. It's interesting because I did a little study in my data and was able to show that IQ, where it's available on offenders, is related to torture. People who torture have higher IQs. And I think it has something to do with the intellectual stimulation and curiosity, sort of playing out a fantasy, having a richer inner life. I hate to say it because it gives this, it might give the wrong impression of what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that the higher the intellect, the more they prolong what plays out in the fantasy. And what's really interesting is that in every case that I have looked at so far of someone who repetitively commits murder with torture, they collect something. They are collectors. It is a trait that they have. John Wayne Gacy collected art, right? Gary Heidnik collected paper money. Robert Badella collected antiques, etc. I can go right down the list. And this guy would be no different. He would be no different. He was also a collector.
Well, to that point, I wonder if the dolls are in play.
No, it's the intellectual curiosity and the control needs, and the idea of I'm looking for something that's out there, and now I have to find it. right? And I can find it. I'm the master collector. Right? I've gone to every yard sale. I've looked on every website, and I got it. And now it's here. And so you got to kind of understand that about this kind of a guy. He's a collector. So he would know where, in fact, if he's anything like I think he is, somewhere there's a key. He had a key of where all these people were. I don't know where it is, but all these types of offenders like Robert Hansen, you eventually discover somewhere they've got a piece of paper that in a coded way reminds them this is this person's location, this is that person's location, because he had to be prolific. You're talking about decades. Now, the other thing is, John, I wanted to ask you, if you do think that the wife is involved in some way, and obviously we don't know yet, but if she is, do you think that he at least committed some offenses alone?
I don't really know if he did. I do know this. He traveled extensively with his wife. Just that alone tends to rebut the idea that she was somehow an abused spouse. She traveled herself also all over the country to these these conventions, dressing up as some bizarre character. Yeah, so they travel together.
Comic Con.
Like they're both collectors. It sounds like.
Yeah.
John, do you know if it was Crime Con or Comic Con?
Comic Con. Yeah, like comic books. You know, they dress up as Batman, that kind of thing, or
cosplay.
Yeah,
it's interesting stuff. But I did also want to bring up this whole thing that came out about the correspondence between Heuermann and Keith Jesperson, the serial killer Keith Jesperson. Have you heard about this, John?
I have, but I don't know the details of it.
Is it okay, Chris, if I talk a little bit about that?
Do you guys just, I've got people here.
Okay.
I know we've been at it for 2 hours, and
John, if you have to go, just that's not a problem. I mean,
we could just.
I'm having a good time talking to you guys. You're really gentlemen.
No, we love you, and we want to make sure though that you get the information out about your symposium as well. Because Gary and I want to talk to him anyway at the end of this. But tell everybody about your symposium, how they can participate, and everything like that.
All right. Well, we had originally set it up for the symposium, that is for December 8th in Malloy University. Malloy University rejected us because our topic was too controversial. St. John's University in Queens, Jamaica, Queens, has accepted us at Marillac Hall on January the 30th between 3:30 and 7:30. The doors will be open and we will hold the symposium. It is free. We also have a GoFundMe that we set up to raise money to pay for the symposium, and if there's any money left to pay for some of the transcripts and work in that nature that we're doing on the case. I just recently took Joe Brewer's testimony once again. That all costs a lot of money. And I'm not a rich lawyer. I wish I was, but so I'm laying all this out of my own pocket.
So what's the GoFundMe address? How can you find it?
It's called GoFundMe. Hold on, let me ask. What is it called? It's called GoFundMe at Magdalene Dismas Society, Inc.
Okay. Mods, can we try to find that and put it into the chat here, the link, so that people can, if they have a desire, they can go over there and donate to help support this cause? Could you say it one more time, and that way our gals will grab it?
Yes, it's GoFundMe at Magdalene Dismas Society, Inc. And it's right now, I understand we've raised about $2,000. It's nowhere near what we need to pay for all this. So if you can help, that'd be great. Let me see what it's called. It's also at Magdalene Dismas Society, Inc. is what it says here. And under GoFundMe. So it's https://www.gofundme.com.lisk. So,
Okay.
all right.
All right. We'll get our people to find it, and we'll put it up. And if somebody can support you, that's never a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm
Never-
sorry to have to end this, but believe it or not, I'm working here at the office and
We
on
totally
this
understand.
case, and we have a new witness that wants to talk to me.
Your time. You want to put her on? You can put her on here. We'll talk to her together.
I don't think that they will go for that.
I get it, John, but we appreciate your time very much. You're a great man, and you're doing great things. And I know hopefully you and Gary can have lunch. I know you two are pretty close to each other.
Absolutely, yeah.
But,
No pizza, Gary. No pizza.
No. Certainly not there.
Yeah. So here's one question though that is for you. Thank you for your unwavering dedication to this case from all. How do you think the departure of Rodney Harris will affect the task force investigation on the other Gilgo victims?
I'm sorry to see Rodney Harrison leave. He's become a friend, a good friend, and a real open-minded commissioner. I can only hope that the new commissioner will be likewise. So I don't know what the new commissioner will do. I know that bureaucracies have a tendency to go back to their patterns, and the police department is, after all, a bureaucracy of the government. So, I've been on the earth too long to have such optimism dominate my thinking. But I'm still hopeful, prayerful that we'll get the right thing from the police department now. Rodney's given it to us already, and too bad he's going.
Well, we appreciate your dedication as well. And you always have a platform here, friend.
Thank you.
If there's anything that we can help support your work and your effort for these victims, feel free to reach out, okay?
I certainly will. Thank you very much. And there are more victims now, so I'm helping them too.
Okay. Well, God bless and have a good evening, okay? And Merry Christmas.
You too. Merry Christmas, everybody, and thank you.
Okay, John. Thank you.
Right, bye now.
Gary, how are you feeling?
Fine. It's very, very interesting to hear John alluding to an ever-growing web of people living and deceased that may have been affected by this alleged serial killer. And he's giving kind of tantalizing clues to what he's going to talk about at this conference, this symposium, which I'll be attending at my alma mater on June 30th. So we'll see. But it sounds like it could be pretty interesting stuff. What I was going to say a moment ago about the Jesperson link, because I haven't heard anybody break it down in the way that I was just about to say this, but I happen to know Keith Revere, who is the podcaster that sort of like facilitated the link between the two of them. And I know from conversation with Keith that there are a number of serial killers that Jesperson has reached out to. And it is interesting when you look at the people that Jesperson has selected to contact. They are people who have quite a lot in common with him. They, for example, are all very large, right? They're all very large men who killed transients and sex workers, typically by strangulation. And so what I thought was that by wanting to reach out to Heuermann, who he might think is guilty, it's like a way of saying, because we know what he said in the letter was, why don't you just come clean? Don't let the cops have the power of having a case against you. Like, just come out and I think you have to remember that Jesperson got caught. And I think it's a way of saying, like, vicariously, I want to kind of live through you the joy of getting away with it, not getting caught, not letting the police have that thrill, right? So don't make the mistake I did. Like you don't get you don't let them catch you. You tell them. And also remember, Jesperson was always a letter writer. That's how he got his attention. I think it's also a way of insinuating himself into someone else's case, so he becomes front page news again, right? Because nobody cares about him. But remember, they're both gigantic men. So the most interesting thing about those letters is how banal they are, how bland, how, Heuermann is basically just complaining about, the food and things like that, right? And it's interesting that he would answer. It's rather foolish to respond. The man is suspected of being a serial killer. He's responding to fanboy letters from a convicted serial killer. Why would you do something like that? And what it suggests is he couldn't let go of the ego thrill that somebody whose work he might have studied, learned from, etc., sought him out, like he was, now part of the group, of these infamous offenders. So that's fascinating to me that correspondence happened. I mean, although he's innocent or proven guilty, it's very difficult to justify how an innocent person would respond to letters from an incarcerated serial killer that have the tone of, why don't you just give in and say what really happened, by saying, instead of just writing back and saying, I have no idea what you're talking about, go away, or not responding. It's odd.
Yeah, that is to your point. Does he feel like he's part of a unique club now, right?
That's what it sounds like. You get the sense that if he is convicted, that he'll start singing like a bird because he likes the attention. I mean, look at Jesperson. Jesperson is like desperate for a dose of attention. So
interesting. What's your let's just shift gears for a minute to Vegas. What's your read on this doctor that can we break him down, do you think, this week?
You mean
if you're feeling
you're talking about the shooter?
The professor, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I have a great deal to say about that. I mean, that's a whole episode.
Okay.
You talking about Dr. Polito?
Yeah, let's do this week. Let's try to start the time when you're feeling better to get into him.
Well, he's certainly one of the most educated mass shooters that I have ever seen. Right? I mean, I remember I was the one of the two creators of the Columbia Mass Murder Database. We did the largest study ever done of mass murder. I could look in the database and tell you, if he was the only doctor to have. I don't think so. I certainly know of a PhD candidate, right, Gang Lu, but an actual long practicing professor. It's pretty unusual. 67. I mean, that's the average age, if I remember correctly, is 37. So he's really an anomaly. But I think, look, whenever I hear about a mass shooting incident, the first thought I always have is, what is the grudge? What is the thing that this person banked on, that this person felt was going to make their life have meaning? And then they felt cheated out of it or deprived. And then they decided to level the playing field because they feel, if I can't have it, why could you have, And I think it looks like so far he was somebody who wanted a job. And he also clearly had some kind of paranoid character structure. He was the kind of person who, if you read his writings about all these, where he was sending these envelopes with white powder, you can see the little screeds that he wrote to each, in each envelope. And, he was grandiose, paranoid, holding grudges, clearly hot-headed, self-obsessed, etc. He refers to himself as having like 160 IQ. He thought that he was like a genius who was unappreciated, and sounds like he had a job in Vegas that he lost.
Yeah, I forget the name of the university. And don't you have his manifesto?
I do. I have, well, manifest. I mean, I have writings of his, but he also was deeply obsessed with the Zodiac killer case, and he was convinced that he had deciphered in one of these very, very difficult to crack cryptograms of Zodiacs the name Arthur Lee Allen, who was a prominent suspect in the case. The David Fincher made the movie Zodiac about that man in, I think, 2007. And I personally am not convinced that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac, but he was. This man Polito was, and that was another thing that irritated him terribly. That that people wouldn't listen to him about this, and but I think this is an example of not the kind of person who is just kind of brittle and emotionally overwhelmed, and then doesn't get a job and takes a gun and abruptly goes to the nearby school and shoots it up. This is a guy who held a grudge and slow boiled, right, and planned and schemed, and then perpetrated an act. So his baseline personality was kind of paranoid, nasty, angry, grudge holding, superior, arrogant kind of person. And then he goes and commits this horrendous act. Fortunately, there weren't more victims.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Brucato needs to get some chicken soup, a warm hot shower. I got sick too over the last couple of days. It's been quite a roller coaster, and I think we should do a program on that this week if you have some time, and maybe Wednesday night or something we can fire it up. And just so everybody knows, I will divulge personally that I have a very close connection to that particular incident. In fact, we'll go over it when we get through it next week. But we're just grateful that more people were not killed. I happen to know the officer as well that took out the shooter. He used to be an officer in Southern California, and I know him very well. His name is Damian Garcia, and he talked about the universe being on schedule, the right place at the right time. This guy was ready to go a lot further than he did, and had not those officers had the courage to get in there and get things going, it could have been very, very, very bad. So, Gary, I love you like my brother. You know that. You're always just an amazing human being. It's very, I don't know, you just have a way of telling it so succinctly that people go, oh, that makes sense. Don't you guys feel that in the chat, that Dr. Brucato's, just that kind of guy? It's almost like sitting here with, not only a close friend, but where do folks get the opportunity to talk about, the new evil? And where would this guy fit on the scale? What's his number?
Polito or Heuermann?
Polito or Heuermann. That way people can go read what your assessment would be.
Well, Heuermann is easier if he's guilty, because we know that he would be sexually sadistic. And a sexually sadistic individual who's committed a murder, at least one murder, the lowest possible score is 17. Once there's torture, has to be an 18. If the torture is severe and protracted, multiple instruments, as gory and unfathomable as possible, that's a 22. But when there's torture where it's more like psychological, or you protract only through strangulation or something like that, it's usually 18, which is where we place people like Dennis Rader. Some people say Bundy should go there because there was some protraction of the death through asphyxiation, through ligature and so forth. I would place him, if he's guilty, I'd place him probably at 18. Polito is one of these, slow burn people who explode, like their rage explodes, like a category 8. And these are people who are grudge holding, narcissistic people who at baseline have a nasty, paranoid, grudge holding quality. And then there's a slight they can't let go of, and they go out and sort of play out an act. So the difference between them and just a hot-headed, emotional person is that they plan. That they're angry, but they can plan to go out and do a horrendous thing. And people at baseline would know there was something odd about that person's personality. That's very important to understand.
Yeah, what are they going to what's your early assessment on what they're probably going to find out from neighbors or friends or family, that kind of thing about him? When you say he's odd, what are the kind of, like, you nailed Brian Koberger before they even arrested him. I mean, if you guys have not seen that episode, go back and look at Dr. Brucato's assessment of Brian Koberger before he even knew there was a Brian Koberger. And those of you who've been here on the interview room for quite some time know for a fact what I'm talking about. Gary absolutely pegged this guy. And lo and behold, when his personality started to come out, everybody was like, check, check, check. Well, and so what do you what do you think this guy's going to, what are they going to flush out?
What ways? I think you're going to hear things like, you'd have a conversation with him or be in his class, and no matter what you were talking about, it would meander back to him. It would meander back to things he was obsessed with. Like, I think what you'll hear is that he thought of the world, as like revolving only around him, right? So you're going to hear people complaining like, oh, I was taking a class on, business or economics or whatever it was. And, but like half of the time he was talking about himself, right? So there's going to be a lot of that, an obsessional focus on things. And also a person that when he talks about people who have not liked him or burned him or, fired him or whatever in the past, will do it with the most awful disdain in his face, like the person is like the tiniest little stupid crumb, because he cannot tolerate a world in which he's not, the best, the smartest, etc. So I think that's that narcissistic core, and that's the kind of person that would say, if you're too stupid to hire me, then there's no reason for you to be alive. Like, you're an idiot. There's no reason for you to be on this earth. So of course that type of person would see himself as some kind of mastermind, that could crack even the Zodiac case, because he's smarter than the police and smarter than the Zodiac killer and smarter than you and smarter than me and smarter than everyone else. So that's the kind of person that I think he is. And I also think that his relationships, his relationships with significant others, whatever, that wouldn't last very long if he had them at all, because unless he just scare the hell out of somebody. But I think that he just would have been too difficult, hot-headed and controlling and difficult. But look for comments from students. I guarantee you they're going to say, oh my God, all he did was talk about these things he was obsessed with. All he did was talk about himself, that kind of thing. And but I don't know, Chris. I mean, I don't see that much info in whatever little writings I'm seeing of his that I have. He comes across as extremely angry and not able to let go of anything. And he thinks that he is a genius. I mean, clearly. So, but he's not. Like many would-be geniuses, he ironically is not even especially bright.
Fascinating. Okay, so we're up to do a show on that?
Of course. I mean, I think we could talk generally about mass shootings, and that would be very, very interesting. And I would be remiss in not taking a moment and telling the group that, especially if they're buying The New Evil, that my co-author on The New Evil and my mentor, Dr. Stone, did pass away on the 6th of December. 90 years old. Wonderful, wonderful human being, totally irreplaceable, one of a kind. And I've decided that the next book I do is going to be sort of through the lens of his mentorship. You know, the conversations we've had privately about cases that haunted us, lessons I sort of learned, you know, at his, at his knee, and incredible tips he gave me about how to deal with and compartmentalize experiences, horrifying things that we have to deal with, and so forth. But I do want to put it out there that he did pass away, and he is greatly missed. He was a giant in the field of forensics, and I mean, I can't say that, emphasize that enough. Chris, you always tell the story that you got to you got to give a talk once after Michael Stone, right?
I did, and it was so intimidating. I didn't know, what to think. He had just presented, and of course, the crowd went crazy, and then all of a sudden, this, retired, or I wasn't retired at the time, I was still active, but this homicide guy gets up, and I'm like, in my head, because Dr. Stoney's such a personable human being. He walks out and he goes, "You're gonna go get him," kind of thing. It was real nonchalant, but he just was very warm, and he had controlled the entire, arena, for lack of a better term. And it was all full of homicide detectives. It was in Wisconsin. It was a homicide symposium. And I got up there talking about those who select children for victimology. And it was amazing that I got a chance to go after Dr. Stone, but he, what are you going to say? He's Dr. Michael Stone. You're Dr. Gary Brucato. Would be like following you. I'd be like, well, that's going to leave a mark.
I would make a comparison. I mean, Michael Stone was really a giant in the field, and I mean, it's like even before he got involved in violence work. Remember, he was extremely instrumental in defining what is now known as borderline personality disorder, for example. And it's very easy to underestimate how important he was for helping to elucidate the genetic contribution to that condition, the relationship between that condition and trauma, the relationship between that condition and bipolar disorder, etc. And Michael was a person who taught me to never shy away from very difficult cases. It gets back to that point you were making earlier, John. To be the one who's willing to work with people that other people find impossible. That's the idea.
I'm trying to. I'm going to pull up here. If I can do this, see if it works. Oh yeah, this is the two of you together.
Oh, I sent you that. I forgot about that. Yeah. That's when we did the show Serial Psyche together, and we were discussing. Lord, who was it we were talking about? I think it was. No, it was a general discussion of serial sexual homicide, and we were walking the host, Rob Kirk, who's a Emmy winner, really brilliant director. We were walking him through serial sexual homicide just by talking to each other, and the guy just let the camera run because he was fascinated listening to the discussion, because Michael contributed so much to what we know about these kinds of offenders, So, but I've always been very honored that I was essentially a protege of Michael's, and I thought it was enormously symbolic that I inherited his library. I was told I could take any volume I wanted, and I took hundreds of them, which are everywhere right now, and his documents and things, and basically told carry on the work. And there's a copy of a book that was in the library by Dr. Ramsland, Catherine Ramsland, a wonderful forensic psychologist, prolific author, dear friend. And she had given it to Michael, and I found it there on the shelf. And when you open it up, she had inscribed it to him. And it said, to a fellow traveler in the darkness, keep those candles burning. And so I talked to her and I said, Catherine, I've got to use that as the title of my book that I'm going to do on my relationship with Michael and the mentorship, Traveler in the Darkness, or Fellow Traveler in the Darkness. And she said, sure. And but that's really what it is that Michael taught me that, because Michael was a great contradiction, as am I, by the way, if anyone ever knew me in personal life, is that I am an authority on the most terrible things that human beings do. But if you know me outside of this work, I am a person that is very, very filled with the light of life. I love life and music and art and culture and people and so forth. And I think it's because, as Michael has always taught me, is that the more darkness you're exposed to, the brighter the light becomes. You know, it becomes, you love it more because it's so opposed to the hideousness that you see. And so, but with Michael being gone, there is a little bit of a dimming. That's how I think of it, you know. So, but I try to keep it burning.
You will. You're an amazing human being, and everybody. I think Gary just had the last word right there. We're so grateful to each and every one.
Can't have any more words.
We're so grateful that each and one of you come here tonight to support these conversations and these fireside chats, for lack of a better term. We absolutely love being with you. We thank you for your support of this channel, and we just ask you, as we go into the holiday season here, whatever you're celebrating, however you celebrate it, we know that the world is sometimes a very difficult place. However, if you keep pressing forward, just like Gary said there, with just the light, a single light in darkness, good things can happen. So we will see you on the next show. Thank you again. Please subscribe. Please share this. And thank you so much for all those who support this evening. So have a good night. Aloha, and continue to take care of each other. Aloha.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.